and welcome to Overtime Hockey Talk. My name is Mark Paul, my co-host Justin Baker, joining me as we do the second half of the Pacific Division. Good morning, Justin.
Hi, good morning.
It's a maybe not rare, but it's an uncommon moment when we actually do a show in the morning. I like it.
Yeah, I have to put on pants for this still too.
Yeah. Well, I mean I have shorts on, but same deal. We promised we were only going to do one episode per the remaining divisions, at least for the Metro and the Pacific. And, as life would have it, I think it's my fault. But, well, I'll blame my children why we're doing a second half.
Blame my children.
Blame my children. Yes, they're being raised by some pretty terrible parents. So they were out of control. No, I don't know. Somebody was melting down towards the end of our last show, so we called it early, and so we're here for part two, which is probably a good thing because I think part one was still like 45 minutes. So, got lots of content on the Pacific Division. If you did not listen to that episode, go back. I don't think there's any screams, bloody murder from children in the background. I don't think you can hear any of that, but. It was the children getting on my wife, not the other way around. So, she's only 3 too. I can't imagine what's going to happen when she's 10. Okay. Well, Justin, here we go. Seattle Kraken. Let's jump right in. Did I lose you or are you there?
Nope, still here.
Okay. All right. We'll shake the morning rust off. We'll jump right into the Seattle Kraken. This was probably the most unexpected turnaround that we've seen in a long time. A team that missed the playoffs by quite a few points, and they go and they have over a 30-point turnaround about, and so. What do you think about this team coming into this year? Because it's very different. Like when you come in with no expectations and you blow people's socks off, okay, fair. But now you're coming into this season and there are some big expectations. This team is playoffs or bust, probably looking to win a round. So the expectations are much different. What do you think about this team coming into a year full of expectations?
Yeah, I don't know if we'd say expectations as in Stanley Cup or bust, but... No,
but playoffs or bust.
Absolutely, yeah. I think playoff expectations are more than reasonable for this team. The difference is, their first year only managed to put up 60 points in the standings, and clearly, when you have a whole bunch of, I don't know if you want to call them castaways, but guys that were basically given away by other teams in the expansion draft, you come in kind of with a little bit of your chip on your shoulder, but they didn't really have, that chemistry and that time to bond that a lot of these teams do, where like teams like Toronto, right? They've had Tavares, Nylander, Marner, all these guys have been playing together for so many years now, right? So they developed that chemistry. And so we kind of saw that take shape a little bit more last year, which was great to see. They end up 100 points in the standings, a 40-point increase. So, I'm more excited really to see where they go next from here, right? Because now that they've got a couple of years under their belt together, essentially it's the same squad from the last 2 years, outside of, a couple little additions and Matty Beniers. And, we'll see what this team does. Now, I am maybe more than anything else interested to see this year with Seattle. Not only do they make the playoffs, but what happens with Shane Wright is my biggest question mark. I know he'll probably... My expectations is he'll probably spend most of the season to start in the AHL, and where he goes from there is anyone's guess, I guess.
Which honestly, for what you have on this team, which is essentially a bunch of, I'll say like middle six forwards, right? Like there's not a ton of top line talent here. Jared McCann can pass for a top line. I mean, guy had 40 goals last year. Nothing to shake your head at. So obviously he's in that top line area. I don't know that I would go as far to say that Jared McCann is elite quite yet. Like, do this again, and I may change my tune on him. But there has been players who are not elite players, and they end up with a lot more goals than what you expect because the system around him just works. I guess I'd say that Matty Beniers is probably has the most potential out of anybody in their top 6 right now. But when I consider Shane Wright and what he likely brings to the table, it's probably at this stage in his career another middle 6 forward, which they don't really need. So there's no reason why he shouldn't. Even if he has a great camp, they need to just send him down. They don't really need him up at this point. So you say go down, like work on all those little parts of your game that you won't have time to work on in the NHL. Get extra attention. Like work on your defensive game. You're going to get called up. Someone's going to get hurt. He can freewheel. There's no waivers for him. You can send him up and down. So I think you take your time. You give him 30 games in the AHL. Bring him up when there's an injury. And, if you just tell him, hey, you're going to go back down, but you're up here for now. Make the most of it. And if things go really well, then you can keep him up. And then you're almost guaranteed, hey, we're going to, you'll be up here towards the end. Coming into the playoffs, assuming that you've taken strides, I would think that he'd be on the playoff roster, assuming they're there. Yeah,
absolutely. And another guy, I'm interested to see where he fits in this year. Tyler Yamamoto. Obviously given away to Detroit for salary cap purposes, and Detroit buys him out. So he goes and signs a 1-year deal.
It was a weird move, was it not?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
25 points in 58 games. I mean, he's a borderline 40-point player, and to just buy him out. I get it. He was making what was this, $3.1 million, but it seemed a little funny. For a team like Detroit, who could probably use a player like a 40-point player on their team.
Well, yeah, I'm actually kind of surprised they didn't keep him just for, flipping him at the deadline kind of thing, right? I mean, that to me was the bigger question mark. I know they essentially wanted Klim Kostin, was the whole point of that trade, is They wanted to get this guy over here for their bottom 6. But I was kind of shocked to see him bought out, given that Detroit had the salary cap that could have hung on to him.
Remember Eli Tolvanen when he was picked up by Seattle, and all he did was go and become basically a 50-point player for them, 8 points in their 14 playoff games. He's a 40 to 50-point guy there now, and I think they're hoping to do the same with Kyler Yamamoto.
Yeah, and when you look at this forward group up front, they have essentially too many forwards now with these 2 guys added, because now where are you going to squeeze them in? You have to assume that, okay, Matty Beniers is going to be your top line center, and then you're probably going to have, either Wenberg or Yanni Gord as your 2-3 center. But on the wings here, you've got Burakovsky, Eberle, Schwartz, Bjorkstrand, Jared McCann, Brandon Tanev, Yamamoto, Tolvanen. And so you've got just a bevy of forwards.
Yeah, there's 8. There's your 4th line, or all right, 4 lines, and then you still have Cole Lind and Pierre-Edouard Bellemare. Yeah.
Well, I get you can maybe put a guy like Brandon Tanev on the 4th line, but do you really want to put Jaden Schwartz on your 4th line? Do you want to put Yamamoto on your 4th line? Probably not.
No, and I mean, maybe this all, potentially opens them up for a trade down the road, but also this is kind of how they intentionally are constructed, is that they're very deep because someone's going to get hurt, and probably not just someone, it'll be someone's. And then you just slide guys right up. So I think they're intentionally designed like this. I don't think they look at this like it's a problem. Although Eberle is a UFA, and so is Wenberg. Wenberg less of an issue than Jordan Eberle, but Jordan Eberle's coming off a 63-point season for them. That's he had his best year since 14-15. Believe it or not, it's hard to believe that you really didn't hear too much fanfare about Jordan Eberle. It's Jordan Eberle, he's good, but having his best season in almost 10 years, 8 years, you got to think. I mean, he's 33, so he'll be 34 for his next contract. I would guess that they want to keep him, but probably not for more than a 2-year deal at something similar to what he's making now. I mean, he's obviously a very important part to that top line.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he is a leader in the locker room. There's a reason he's got an A on his jersey. So, I do wonder if, the Kraken do name a captain finally this season. But regardless, he is a leader in that locker room and a guy I think they do want to keep around for the next couple of years at least, while guys like Beniers and Shane Wright kind of, find their path to, I don't know if you want to call it being star players, but top-line guys for this team.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's shift to the defense, because their defense, Vince Dunn signs a nice little extension there, $7.3 million. So he's well on his way to making plenty of money here. A 4-year deal. It'll take him right into UFA status. He'll be at the end of that deal 30 years old, so he can cash in again at the end of that deal, which the way his trajectory is, he'll be cashing in again. Once again, their defense is kind of built like their forward group. They've got a bunch of middle six defensemen, second pairing style defensemen. Other than Vince Dunn, I think I'm willing to tip my cap and give him that he's a first pairing kind of guy. I don't know if I would put him as a number one, but pretty close to it if he's not. But then there's just a ton of number 3s and 4s, which is not a bad way to build your defense. It's clearly working for them. I just wonder, is their depth enough? Because their depth does not necessarily extend the way that their forward group does. If one of these guys goes down, they don't have a whole lot behind, Dunn, Alexiak, Larson, Dumoulin, Schultz, and some combination of William Borgen and Cal Fleury, which Cal Fleury is still. I think the book's still out on whether or not Cal Fleury is really going to be anything. He only played 12 games last year, 9 the year before. This is probably his last shot at anything for Cal Fleury.
Yeah, Cale Fleury, right? But I mean, the one thing I will say is they do have. Like you said, a lot of good number 3 defensemen. And so to me, as long as guys stay healthy, I think they'll be a cohesive group right there. And they're essentially, these guys have all been playing together the last couple of years. So the more you can keep these guys together and healthy, the better. I think they're going to function as a unit back there. And really, figuring out that depth, right, is going to be obviously a concern. And when we talked about the amount of forwards they have up front, maybe there's an opportunity there for, in case, a major injury happens, right? Say Adam Larson goes down, he's probably your best defensive defenseman on this unit. And so if he goes down, essentially you have an opportunity maybe, or, you look at it and say, you know what, hey, can we maybe move a guy like, Bjorkstrand or Tanev? Well, probably not Tanev. He's a fan favorite out there, but maybe a Yamamoto and bring back a number 4 defenseman to fill in on that depth.
Yeah, sure. That's definitely a possibility too. I think probably ultimately is the biggest question the fact that for the 3rd year in a row, we're coming back with the same goaltending crew, other than Martin Jones not being here, who had everybody talked about how he kind of had this career turnaround, when in reality he was still pretty, at absolute best last season, he was average, right? 2.99 goals against, .886 save percentage. I guess that's pretty under average in terms of that save percentage. It was actually his worst save percentage of his career. And everybody's talking about how he had such a good bounce back year. Yeah, he went 27-13-3, which was a far cry from his 12-18-3 the year before in Philadelphia. But an .886 save percentage, minus 21.4 goals saved, below expected, above for that. That's terrible. He truly has been one of the worst full-time goaltenders in the NHL over the last 5-6 years. 5 years, about 5 years. The last 5 years, he's been quite bad. How is this team now? I know he's gone. And you're back with Philip Grubauer and Chris Dreger, and Grubauer had a nice little playoff, but again they didn't it was one playoff. He still had a .903 save percentage, not the best, .895 over the course of the regular season. My biggest question: can this team make the playoffs again if they keep on getting this very mediocre to, I'd say more like bottom 20 in the league type of goaltending? and they did nothing to try and change it.
Yeah, so here's the funny part, right? We talked about their terrible goaltending, right? I mean, of course, Martin Jones to me was not the savior that everybody panned him out to be. Yes, he came out and he was hot for a small little stretch, but then he immediately went back to typical Martin Jones, which is why the numbers don't reflect, the quality goaltender that everybody thinks he is. And so, to me, it's funny. I when I look at some other numbers, right? Obviously, we know Seattle can score. They have the depth up front. And if these guys can continue to play the way they did last year at the Ford Group, scoring at the pace they did, right? They finished 4th in the NHL in goals for. But when you look at their goals against, they actually, when you look at the team that scored the most goals in the NHL, the Edmonton Oilers, Seattle Kraken led in 4 less goals than the Edmonton Oilers. And yes, we're worried about Jack Campbell, but we're not essentially like looking at their goaltending situation and saying, oh man, they're screwed. Like they're in big trouble. Whereas we look at Seattle and we're like, oh man, they could be in a little trouble if they continue to play the way they did. So I still think they're a playoff team with the goaltending they have. Now, do I think they need to improve on the goaltending? Absolutely. I think we need to see that Philip Grubauer that we had in the playoffs. I think Chris Drager needs to come back and show us, not necessarily give us fantastic numbers like he did in Florida, but be closer to that goaltender that you were in Florida, and the reason why that essentially Seattle went out and got you and brought you in.
Yeah, and I think it's if Grubauer has another year where he's just a bum, they could buy him out. They would save a decent amount of money over the course. His cap hit would go from 5.9 to basically less than $1 million, then 2.1, 3.2, 1.8, 1.8, 1.8. So there would be a decent savings. It's more or less spread out. But if you needed that money, it would be an option to buy out Philip Grubauer after this year. Obviously not right now. And then Chris Drager is a UFA at the end of the year. I think it's very likely that he'll be gone, and he'll find a small little place somewhere for a league min kind of deal at that point, because he's proven that deal that he signed after having a solid year in Florida was definitely more or less a blip on the radar. It just has not. I mean, he basically had 35 good games in the NHL.
Yeah, reminds me of Scott Darling. Like, no offense to Scott Darling, but had a great year in Chicago, signed a massive deal, and then flopped out. Yeah, and I mean, an .899 save percentage on clearly. Now there is this other portion, is that hey, Drager .899. You've got Martin Jones with an .886, and Philip Grubauer with a poor save percentage. Like, maybe there's something to look deeper and go, well, maybe it's not all the goaltending. I mean, these couple goalies are kind of all in the same. Grubauer's .895 and Drager's .899, so they're all in the same kind of category. It could be that their style of play is also affecting their save percentage, getting higher danger chances against, and that definitely does play a factor. Willing to concede that a little bit, but it's not as if taking away a few of those chances takes Philip Grubauer from being bottom of the barrel to one of the better goalies. I think it's reasonable to think that if you brought in a good goalie here, this would be a very good team, as opposed to another year of being probably a playoff bubble. Even if they're solidly in the playoffs, I would still say that within that 5 points of the playoffs is still a bubble team. So I think it's likely that that's where they fall again, because their depth is just unbelievable and no one can keep up with them. The one thing that I'll say, if there's a reason they missed the playoffs, it's because more teams take them seriously for more of the year, and they end up not getting quite as hot. Remember last year they had a couple stretches where they were just winning a ton of games, and I think teams just weren't ready for them. And teams are certainly going to be ready for the Kraken this year. Yep.
All right. Let's move on to the... Oh, sorry, you didn't give your take. You didn't tell me. Oh, you did, I guess. You said they're going to make the playoffs. Is that your... Yeah,
I mean, I think they'll make the playoffs, but I do think they're going to be that last wild card spot. Essentially, I think Calgary's going to end up jumping them at some point this year, but like you said, with teams taking them more seriously, I think Seattle's going to be fighting off one of those, central power teams like Winnipeg, or St. Louis, and essentially getting in there at the playoffs at the end, but doing it by a slim margin.
Okay, yeah. So and you have 5 teams making it from the Pacific, so that
I do. Yep.
that helps. Okay, let's move on to the Los Angeles Kings, who finished 3rd in this division last year. They were basically going back and forth with the Edmonton Oilers for a while there as to who's going to get home ice advantage. And then the Oilers, of course, pulled away pretty handedly at the end. And for the second year in a row, the LA Kings lose in the first round to the Edmonton Oilers, which is, it's sort of unfair. The Edmonton Oilers have done this before. I think it's more to the Winnipeg Jets. Like, the Winnipeg Jets had a really good team in the 80s, and they just kept playing the Oilers in the first round every time. And not that I'm comparing this Oilers iteration to Gretzky, Messier, Curry, all those guys, or Paul Coffey and Grant Fuhr, but it does suck when you have to play a team like that in round 1 that is just going to, they're going to go all out. That's a tough team to play in round 1. So now the Kings find themselves in a spot where they've made the playoffs 2 years in a row, and I think this year it's not just make the playoffs. It's got to be, we got to win a round, maybe 2, and let's make a run for the first time in almost 10 years, really go and make a playoff run.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I think when you bring in a guy like Pierre Dubois, you're making a statement saying, hey, we're here for real. We're a legit contender. And we're also setting ourselves up for future success too, right? Anze Kopitar signed an extension for 2 years at $7 million, and I think that kind of foreshadows where things are going, where, hey, you know what? He's slowly going to be, transitioned into maybe like the number 2 guy and let Dubois be that number 1 center. But, this team, like, similar to Seattle, I think has a lot of depth at the forward group, but where I think, Seattle has guys that maybe had never really done a lot before. To me, when you look at LA's forward group, they're guys that can all do it and have done it.
Yes, that is very true. It's a unique situation to be on a team that a lot of your big name players stuck around for a rebuild, and they're hopefully they'll be rewarded for it from their perspective. What you said about Kopitar and Dubois and maybe kind of switching that number 1 center spot. The unique thing that LA has is almost, you've got this offensive firepower in Dubois, and then you have this defensive juggernaut with Kopitar and Deneau. So you've got this ability, end of the game, if you're down, you could put Dubois out there. You can also have Kopitar out there. That's not a bad option, the way that guy can still dish the puck. But when you're up, you can put out Deneau. You can cycle between Deneau and Kopitar in the last couple minutes, and if you feel like you need to leave Dubois on the bench, it's not a big deal. And you've got the defensive centers to do it. You can also toss Dubois on the wing very easily. He's played the wing before, and so to be able to have that option and load up with Kopitar, Dubois, and Deneau at the end of a game, being able to have 3 capable defensive centers, like, I think Dubois' defensive game's probably a little underrated. Not that I think he's winning any Selkies anytime soon, but even on some pretty bad teams, he managed to be out on the ice for like when you look at his plus minus, he's in a good position almost every year. He's always been a guy who's been at least somewhat responsible in his own zone and has killed a few penalties in his day. And so I think there's a unique situation for LA to be able to load up with 3 defensive centers at the end of a game, which could be kind of, it's something that we don't really ever see, but maybe there's the options there to load up with those guys. Yeah,
they've got probably some of the best center depth in the NHL right now with those 3 guys. I don't know if there's, you could compare them to almost any other team. And, assuming that maybe you put Ryan Nugent-Hopkins down the middle, right, on that third line, which he's probably not going to be playing this year, but
that would be the one that would trump it. McDavid, Draisaitl, and Nugent Hopkins. There you go.
But this is a scary top 3 center group to play against, and the crazy part is they still have younger guys that are still coming up and going to be transitioning into full-time NHLers, and even at the center depth. You got Alex Turcotte, who's still young and hungry, and same with Quentin Byfield. He's a guy who's kind of still discovering where he fits in this lineup, but he's still growing, and I think, that to me is going to be the bigger question mark this year is, who is Quentin Byfield? Because we've seen him now for essentially 2 full NHL seasons. And as long as he can stay healthy, I think, he has an opportunity to end up being a top 6 guy for this team somewhere in the next couple of years and being a legit threat offensively. So, we'll see if he truly is going to be the number 2 overall pick that he was, or if he's going to be, kind of looked at like Alex Lafreniere and kind of like a question mark, like, hey, what really is this?
Yeah, and with Byfield in particular, I think there's probably few players in the National Hockey League that were more affected from a career arc standpoint by all the COVID cancellations, and his career just took a bad turn because of just not getting that skating time. I mean, he's been in the league since 2020-21, and he's played 99 games in the National Hockey League. Now, some of that's due to injury, some of that's due to shortened season, and when you look at what he's played outside of the league, I mean, I think it totals 48, 59, 66 games. So, I mean, that's not a ton of hockey to be playing for a guy who's developing. I just think his development got kind of screwed up. And so with Quentin Byfield in particular, I think I'm willing to give him a little bit extra time to try and see if he can develop. He could be somebody who at 23, 24 really blossoms into himself. I see him this year kind of as like, this is really his second year in the NHL. That's how I'm viewing this year. As he's got 99 games under his belt, but last year he had that injury, and I mean he made it back for the playoffs. So 4 points in 6 games in the playoffs. If he can continue that kind of point production in the regular season, I mean, you're looking at a 50, 60 point season, which would be fantastic, and I think LA fans would be more than pleased if he could put up those kind of numbers. But I'm looking at this as Quentin Byfield's second year. Is how I'm gonna personally look at it. Okay. From a development standpoint.
Yeah, I don't hate it because he's still young, and you still got time with this guy, right? I mean, he still has the size, he still has the speed. I mean, he can play center, he can play on the wing, so you have time to let this guy basically find out where he fits best in this team.
Yeah, and you've got tons of guys ahead of him who, I mean, I think it's more likely that he probably ends up on the wing, which is probably where he needs to be anyways because of his size. It probably just makes more sense to have him play the wing. And maybe later in his career you can try him at center again, but you don't really need him to play center. You've got Deneau signed for another 4 years. You've got Kopitar here for another 3, and Pierre-Luc Dubois for 8. So there's just no reason that he needs to play center. I think putting him on the wing and having him learn the defensive positions of the wing to just like have that hammered in and just say, like, forget about the center position for right now. We're going to focus on the wing. I think that would honestly be the best move for his career, unless you think that Pierre-Luc Dubois is going to move to the wing, or one of these center like Kopitar or Deneau. If you think, particular Kopitar, a lot of times these older centers, they do shift to the wing eventually because it is a harder responsibility at center. But I don't think that's happening this year for Kopitar, who's still consistently in the Selke conversation. So I think it's just best to assume, hey, Quentin Byfield's a left wing, and play that left side hard. Go score some goals and use your body. Yeah,
and you mentioned Kopitar right there. He's been playing on Kopitar's wing all last year, and so if there's anybody to learn the center position from, I mean, Kopitar's the guy you want him to learn from. He Absolutely. Knows how to play both ends. So
he's decent defensively too, I hear.
Yeah.
Okay, let's shift to their defense, because I think, obviously the biggest, most interesting portion of this defense is a potential Calder Trophy winner, and that is Brandt Clarke, who is finally going to make his what feels like it's been forever. I know he's only drafted in 2021, but it just felt like things have been brewing for him, and he had an amazing playoff last year, 23 points in 12 games with the Barrie Colts in the OHL. Had an outrageous regular season, 61 points in 31 games, 23 goals. This kid's the real deal, and LA's defense is about to, I think, change for the next 10 years here with Brandt Clarke. given the rest of the lineup, Drew Doughty, they signed Gavrikov. You got Mikey Anderson and Matt Roy. I think that Brandt Clark probably slides into that second pairing, and you're going to give him every opportunity on the power play to really spark this offense, which I think is probably, if there's anything that was missing from last year, it was the blue line chipping in on offense.
Yeah, I agree. I think, again, you have an opportunity with, when you talked about that right side, Matt Roy, Drew Doughty, right? Matt Roy is still going to be a quality second pairing guy, but you have that flexibility now with Clark in there where you can move these guys back and forth between the second and third pairing. You can give Clark that, that number 2 power play time. You can have him come in and kind of just slowly creep, through the rest of the year up that lineup and eventually, have that opportunity to take over in the next couple of years to be that number 1 guy I suspect he's going to be. And, again, I think, by having him sheltered on that third line, you don't have to rush him in here like some teams do with, a high pick like him. You can have him learn the game responsibly the right way and have him just be ready to go full force when they need him to.
Yeah, and that's the, when you look at their defense from last year, I know that Sean Durzee's out. He was the only other player besides Drew Doughty with more than 30 points on that defensive side. Next was Matt Roy with 26 points. Mikey Anderson had 20. Sean Walker with 13. And then, Alexander Edler, 11. I know Gavrikov was only there for 20 games, but Gavrikov, I think he's probably, if there's anybody else that has potential to have over 30 points, it would be him. He only had 19 last year between Columbus and LA, but there isn't a whole lot of offense from this back end. They lose Sean Durzi, but Brandt Clark comes in here. I think that there's a chance that he puts up the most points by a defensive rookie that we have seen in a very long time.
Ooh, that's bold.
Now, what did Cale Makar in his rookie year? What points did he put up? Let's see here. What do you think of LA's goaltending situation? While I look this up, Phoenix Copley, Cam Talbot coming back with a different look from last year. No more Jonathan Quick. Is this goaltending group going to be good enough? Well, I guess it's kind of that question again with with Seattle being right there. Is their goaltending going to be good enough, and can they stay healthy to make a run at the playoffs and to be good enough to win a round?
Yeah, that's the question, right? I do think this is a team that historically has played a more defensively tight, hard-checking game. And they're going to end up, last year they were 16th in the league as far as goals against, and I think they're probably going to be somewhere towards the middle. But I think Cam Talbot is the type of goaltender that thrives when he does have a more solid defensive team in front of him, and I think he's going to get that with the center depth they have and the guys they have playing in their bottom 6. They'll have that opportunity to give him good defensive minutes. And I think Cam Talbot kind of has been shunned or cast aside almost the last couple of years. I mean, look, he was in Minnesota, played very, very well. They bring in Marc-Andre Fleury and sort of cast him out of there, and so he has to go to Ottawa. They, obviously had defensive inefficiencies there, so not necessarily his fault or any kind of struggles that he had. I thought he played well enough in Ottawa, but then, again, when, push came to shove, they just kind of let him loose too and said, you know what, we're passing on you. I mean, he is up there in age, and maybe that was kind of part of the reason. Maybe he wanted a longer extension, wanted more money, but it does get risky with guys in that age, especially with injuries in this goaltending position. But I think Cam Talbot's going to be a guy that's going to come in, solidify that goaltending position for them. I like the tandem with Copley there. I think he was a good 1B to have. And, again, these guys are not spring chickens. They're not young guys. So, you have to manage their minutes the right way. And I think by giving them maybe a 50-35 split with, Cam Talbot getting close to 45, 50 games, I think is going to be the right way to approach it. Now, again, when you look at what they have in the minor leagues, they've got David Rittich. So if for some reason, right, one of these guys go down, they do have a capable number 3 to come up who has seen starter minutes in the past. So a guy I'm not worried about coming in and stepping in to handle any kind of minutes because, again, let's face it, anything's better than Jonathan Quick at this point. So I think the goaltending is definitely improved, and I do think in the long run we'll see better numbers out of this group.
Yeah, Cam Talbot, definitely no stranger to playing a lot of games, though. So it has been a minute since he's played a lot of games, but 16-17 he played 73 regular season games and another 13 playoff games. 17-18 he played 67 games, and 21-22 is the last time he played more than 40. He played 49 plus a playoff game. That was the year that Marc-Andre Fleury came in and stole his show. I think he's got a lot to prove. I mean, he has been on, since 18-19, he's been on 6 teams. Since the 18-19 season. He was on Edmonton, Philadelphia, Calgary, Minnesota, and Ottawa. The longest he stayed with one team was Minnesota for 2 seasons. So he's bounced around a lot. He's got his 1-year prove-it deal. And, I know he's 36, so there's not exactly a whole lot he can do in terms of getting long-term deals. But, hey, if he has a nice season here, he could get another $3 to $4 million contract with his next one. And, I think this is hopefully a nice last hurrah, and he finally kind of finds a home here in LA and can win in some way. So, by the way, I pulled up the most points for a rookie defenseman in a season. Do you know who has the most points as a rookie in one regular season? Yes.
Who are we talking? The salary cap era or all time?
All time.
Oh, okay.
It's actually a former LA King. It happened on the LA Kings.
It happened on the LA Kings. Wow.
Yes. And he eventually did play for the Detroit Red Wings.
Jeez. Larry Murphy?
Larry Murphy, 76 points in 80 games in 1980-81.
Wow,
second most is Brian Leach at 71. He did that in 68 games, though. And then Gary Suter for the Calgary Flames in 85-86. So, but the last time, so the highest point total for a rookie defenseman in the salary cap era, do you know who that is?
Ooh, in the salary cap era.
Yep. It was not, I'll give you a hint, it's not Cale Makar, but it was the same rookie year.
Quinn Hughes?
Yes, it was Quinn Hughes. 53 points in 68 games for, and Cale Makar had 50 and 57 that year. You know, that was the COVID year. 50. They both would have probably shattered some of these other records had, especially Cale Makar. 57 games. Had he played a full 82 slate, it's likely he could have contended with Larry Murphy. I don't know that Brant Clark is able to go after Larry Murphy. I'm not willing to say that, but I do think that Brant Clark could very well become the highest scoring defensive rookie in the salary cap era and eclipse Quinn Hughes. I think he's going to be. I wouldn't go that
far, but
he's going to be that good. Which would be 54 points. If you can put up 54 points, he'll tie Denny Potvin for the 13th best offensive rookie year.
Okay, I would be happy to see him get 35 points this year. So,
well, I'm setting the bar a little higher.
Well, okay.
All right, Kings. You have them in the playoffs.
Yeah, I think they're battling for that number 3 spot. I think the 2 teams ahead of them aren't necessarily that much further ahead in terms of standings than they are, but I do think ultimately the Kings will just slide back into that number 3 spot. Okay,
I'm going to make a little bit of a bold prediction here for the Kings. I love the combination of veterans and youngsters, and I actually like what they're doing at the goaltending position. They only spent $2.5 million on their goaltending. They could always go out and trade for a goaltender later if there's an injury, because they have, they haven't spent that much on their goaltending. And I think it would be easy to me to get rid of Victor Arvidsson. I think you could find a way to move his contract if you want to. I guess, he did have a really nice playoff last year, but he is a UFA at the end of the year. So if you did need to move somebody, he's always an option if you had to bring in a goaltender, because I think you could trade Victor Arvidsson if some of your young guys were really stepping up and having great years, and you said, you know what, we don't really need Victor Arvidsson. He's expensive. If you needed to go out and get a goalie, I could see that being an option, because otherwise they don't really have much cap space at all. But I think this team for much of the year is going to be sitting in the 1-2 spot in the Pacific. I think this is probably the year that I think they'll jump Vegas. I think that Vegas is going to slide a little bit. We'll talk about that, but I think they're going to jump Vegas, and they will sit in the number 2 spot when all is said and done. I think they're just going to keep on taking another step, and that natural progression is to contend for that top spot in the division. I think they'll be right there. If they don't win the division, it'll be a 4 point difference between the top and the Kings. I think they're going to be that good. All right, let's go Edmonton Oilers. They finished second in the division last year, and a disappointing second-round loss to the Vegas Golden Knights, who ultimately went on to win the Stanley Cup. And we're pretty much rolling it back. Not much changed about the Oilers other than adding Connor Brown, who I really like, and from a defensive standpoint, they kind of did their additions during the trade deadline last year when they added Matthias Ekholm, and we're going to run it back with Jack Campbell and Stuart Skinner. Let's start there. They don't really have much of a choice with Jack Campbell. They have to run it back. What do you think of Jack Campbell's chances of turning this ship around and getting back to his at least average to above average goaltending that we had seen for the previous 3-4 seasons?
Yeah, I do think you mentioned one name in there, right? Matthias Ekholm. I think the addition of having a guy like him on the blue line is going to help this goaltending a ton, right? When you have, speaking from, what little experience I have playing goal, right? When you have solid defensemen in front of you that you can rely upon, you play a little bit looser, you play a little bit more at ease, and you're not so worried about, you're not gripping that stick a little tighter. You're not trying to, play irresponsibly and trying to flop everywhere to make that save, right? Because you're just so desperate. You're, having constant 2-on-1s coming at you, that kind of stuff. I think, again, with the emergence of Stuart Skinner, I think that him playing a few more games than Jack Campbell, I think they're going to probably put Campbell in a 35 to 40 game role and give Stuart a few more games. And I think because of that, Jack Campbell necessarily, because he has his money and he's, I don't necessarily think he's going to be thinking about potentially being bought out, although I do think that will be a possibility if he has another down year. But I think he's going to come in and with a little less pressure and just go out there and play his game. And I think eventually he'll get back and have some decent numbers, because to me, he's just a solid 1B goaltender. I don't think he's anything more than that. They obviously overpaid and expected him to be, that number one, here's 60 games for you, Jack Campbell kind of guy. And to me, that's not who he is and what he's capable of. And so I think if they can relegate his minutes to keep him at, 35, 40 games and give the bulk of the games to Stuart Skinner with his defense now, I think he'll be okay. Yeah. And
I think that's exactly why the Leafs didn't pay him the money that he wanted for the length of time that he was looking for, because they didn't see him as a pure number one. They knew that he would need to be shadowed by somebody else who could pick up the slack and play 30 to 40 games alongside him, which is not a knock on him. It's just that's just what kind of goalie he is. He did have a really nice stretch towards the end of the year. He had a really, really rough start. He was letting in a lot of goals. But in terms of being able to battle, he won 8 games in a row. Then he went and he lost 2 in a row in a shootout, and then 1 in OT, which is what it is. Then he lost a couple, and then he finished the year winning 4 in a row. So really, he won 12 of his last 17 games, and 3 of those games were in a shootout or overtime. So he was 12, 2, and 3 in his last several games. So that's fine. You know, if your goalie's winning you those types of games, when you look at his stats, even over the course of the whole year where he played so terrible, he still played better than Martin Jones, and everybody wanted to celebrate Martin Jones's resurgence. So
right.
I think it's fair to say that he'll likely have a better season this year with the Oilers because of Matthias Ekholm, a more complete year from Evan Bouchard, who's it's already better defensively than Tyson Barrie ever has been in his entire freaking career. So I think that's a huge upgrade. And the Darnell Nurse probably has a bounce back year in terms of the way that he defends. I think maybe just signing that big contract, there can be a lot of pressure that comes with that. And we've seen a lot of guys sign these big deals and then they kind of take this strange step backwards where you're like, what the frick happened to you? And I think there's a good chance that Darnell Nurse is able to be better. Is he a $9.25 million defenseman? No. They overpaid him probably to keep him. But I think he can still be a good top 4 defenseman. And I think that we'll see a bounce back year from him too. And all absolutely. Of that will turn into better goaltending performances from both Jack Campbell and Stuart Skinner throughout the entire year. And I honestly, the addition to Connor Brown in that top 9 is going to make such a difference for the Oilers because, well, he doesn't necessarily score tons of goals. He had 21 goals in 56 games in 2021. 10 goals 2 years ago, and of course last year the injury and whatnot. He did put up no points in the 4 games he was in, but Connor Brown is somebody who can really just spice up a line. I mean, he's not going to quote unquote drive a line, but he's going to create a ton of energy. He can kill penalties, and he's kind of that Swiss Army knife style type of player that maybe the Edmonton Oilers have been missing. And I think you can slot him in all over the place. You're probably not going to go and try and play him alongside McDavid and Draisaitl at all, but if you needed to, he could play up there. But he can also play all throughout the lineup. He could play on your 4th line all the way up to your 1st line, and I think that having a player like that is invaluable. And so I think he'll be a nice addition and provide some depth, which is what Edmonton for the last 20 years has been looking for, a little bit of depth. It seems like.
Yeah, and I think they'll need it this year too, because when I look at a lot of guys like Zach Hyman, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, right? They all had career years last year, right?
Yeah, I don't think we're looking at 104 points again from Nugent-Hopkins.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen unless he gets 60 points on the power play, which actually is possible.
It's very possible, yeah.
We might get 60 power play points from Evan Bouchard on the power play the way he plays back there, but
I mean, you just have to look at the way the playoffs went. Nugent-Hopkins, 37 goals in the regular season, and in 12 playoff games, he had 1 goal.
Yeah.
And I think that's not necessarily, I think he's better than that. That would be like an 8-goal season. But I think that he's a 20-goal guy. Throughout his career, that's about what he's averaged is 20 goals, like 233 goals in 801 games, basically a 20-goal guy. So I think he'll probably regress to the mean a little bit. And with the way points have gone up, the way their power play is, he's probably still sitting at a point per game. But I don't think we're seeing the century mark again for Nugent-Hopkins, which does mean that somebody else likely needs to pick up the slack. I think somebody like Connor Brown. I think Evander Kane could be better. I think there's a chance that he has a little bit better of a
he needs to be better
offensive year, hopefully. At 28, only 28 points. So I think that if you have that balance out, that it'll be okay for the Oilers. They're still going to be the highest scoring team in the NHL. It's like a guaranteed top 5, and I'd be willing to put a good chunk of money on them being the highest scoring team again.
Yeah, I would too. I think between them and Toronto, right, they're going to be up there, but I do think they'll be better defensively, and ultimately that's why I think adding guys like Connor Brown, I'm hoping that Dylan Holloway takes another step forward and is closer to the guy I think the player he can be. And with that said, bringing in guys on PTOs like Brandon Sutter Adam Ernie and Sam Gagne, I think these are guys that are going to provide good depth. Assuming that, they sign one or two of these guys, I think they'll add good depth to their bottom six. And, ultimately, I do think with this improved defense, hopefully I think Edmonton is poised to be the top team in this division next year.
I would agree. That's exactly where I have them as well. I do really hope that Brandon Sutter has a comeback and that he's able to sign a deal. That would just be awesome. He hasn't played a pro game since the early days of 2021, and it would be good to see him make that comeback after the injury that he sustained. So that'd be fun. Sam Gagne has always been somebody who, he's going to find a job, whether it's with the Oilers or somebody else. He's one of those guys. He can bounce around and he can slide up in your lineup somewhere, and he's going to be who he is. You know what he is. He's been in the league forever. And hey, for his money, he does have the best offensive game in the last 25 years. What do you have? Was it 8 points or 9 points that he had?
8 points. Scored 5 goals. I remember that.
Yeah, that was crazy.
So vividly.
So fun. All right. Well, let's move on to the last team that we have in the Pacific Division. It's the Vegas Golden Knights. Of course, the Vegas Golden Knights won the Stanley Cup for the first time in their history last season, and they largely did it on the backs of their monster defense, super mobile, super big, clogged up the middle, and made it hell for any team trying to get through. The Florida Panthers ran into a literal wall with the Vegas Golden Knights. The way that they play, I just wonder if they kind of remind me of very good teams throughout the years where, like the Tampa Bay Lightning. They kind of just could coast for a little while in the regular season, and you go, oh wait, what are they? Why aren't they? They're not doing that well. And then they could just kind of come on at the end of the season, make the playoffs, and that's all that mattered. And I think that Vegas is probably going to be the same way. You can't play the way Vegas played in the playoffs all year long. So you're banking on other ways to play throughout the regular season. You're going to get up for big games and whatnot, but your big defensemen are always going to be big. But it's, I think, going to be a regular season where you go, okay, Vegas is definitely getting in. They're not going to have the injuries that they had the 2 years ago where they missed. I still expect them to have over 100 points in the regular season. I think they just comfortably get in. I don't think they care where they slot, and they're just they'll hop in the playoffs, and they know they can beat anybody, literally anybody in the NHL. I think they can beat. It doesn't mean that I think they're going to win the cup, but I think that they're a confident group. They should be. They added Barbashev. They've got that forward depth. Jack Campbell's healthy. Mark Stone's healthy. And the only guy they lost was Riley Smith. And they walk in here with probably the deepest defense group in the league. Just very few question marks for this team other than, hey, can their goalies get it done throughout a whole year? Which, are we really that concerned about this team's goalies because of how they play in front of them? Now I'll stop talking.
I mean, goaltending first. I'll start there. Not concerned at all with the goaltendings, right? Everybody forgets, how good of a playoff Adin Hill really had. He obviously earned that contract, and when you look at the analytics on his numbers, he was much, much better than his numbers actually appear to have. And to me, I think he was the Conn Smythe Trophy winner, in my opinion. But again,
I hate giving that stuff to goalies.
Get off it.
I hate it. It's like giving the MVP to the quarterback every year.
Oh, come on. There's actually not, you look at it though, and quarterbacks get it every year, but goaltenders rarely. They don't get it that much.
That's because but on this team there was a couple guys I would have given it to over Adin Hill, because Adin Hill only played 16 games.
Well, regardless,
he didn't even play an entire round.
I'll give you that. He's always been the guy that steps in and kind of saves your team, right? He did that in Phoenix, and now he came in here in Vegas and kind of saved their bacon there. And
yeah, he's always been a decent goalie.
Yeah, and he's finally getting paid. I think, it was a good move to only give him 2 years, because this is a guy who, I'm confident will play to the level that he's getting paid to play at. But, again, he's 27 years old. I don't know. He doesn't have a long enough resume for me to feel comfortable giving him, 6-7 years, whatever. So this will work out nice. He'll be 29 and he can still go out and sign another big money deal. But the big thing, question mark, and we all forget, is Logan Thompson was an all-star last year. So, you still got this guy under contract for 2 more years at $750,000. So you're going to get some good value out of this guy.
When I look at his salary, I'm like, isn't that below the league minimum? What's the league minimum?
I think it's like 725 or something like that.
Is it 725? Wow, man.
Yeah.
766. Because I feel like other guys are signing 775, and that's always what I see. That's like the rookie minimum, 775. He's making
750 is the league minimum.
Okay,
now,
750. So. There you go. Yeah. I like Logan Thompson. I think that he is a good 1B goaltender. He's on a really good team, so I think his stats are shaded towards playing behind a really nice defense. But I think he's a good goalie, and I don't have any question marks about their goaltending. If one of these guys goes down, it'll be okay. I don't think that Robin Lehner is ever coming back. That's kind of the vibe that I get.
It doesn't seem like it.
Yeah, very, very strange. What a weird... And you want to talk about lucky in some respects? Vegas goes from Marc-Andre Fleury, and they go, actually, we're going to have Robin Lehner. Actually, Robin Lehner is out of his mind. And then somehow they stumble into Logan Thompson and Aiden Hill. And after remember, like, they were so bad at the backup position with Malcolm Subban and like using so many different goaltenders, and they just kind of happen to stumble upon these two guys, and what do you know, they're both all-star goalies, and Conn Smythe potential is kind of like just good on them.
It's a good problem to have.
yes I their defense, I mean, it's just unreal. I mean, their third pairing of is basically half
Whitecloud and Haig.
Half the team's league's top pair, or second pairing. That's how good they are. So, I think it goes without saying, this defense is very good. I don't really have any questions. I mean, it's very rare that a team returns all 6 defensemen from the year before, especially a Stanley Cup winning team. Right. Usually you've got one guy who's like, well, thanks for the cup, I've got to go get paid. But just so happens all of them are under contract. Good on them. And, Martinez is going to be up for an extension. I'm sure that they'll happily bring him back at the end of the year, assuming that he stays healthy. He is 36. He'll probably be on 1-year deals the rest of his career. But I guess from a forward standpoint, that's really where the question marks come from a roster construction, because you've got Chandler Stevenson at $2.75 million, who is due an extension, and Jonathan Marchessault, one of 4 guys left from the expansion draft, and he's making $5 million at 32 years old. He's going to be due for a raise.
That's my winner.
Those are, Marchessault, he will get signed. They're insane if they don't re-sign him. But you could see them doing it, right? Did you just see them shipping him off somewhere?
Yeah, that's the Vegas mentality, right? We're like, okay, great, thanks for your service, but we're going on the next guy. Like, not necessarily no loyalty, but they're going to do what's best for the team, and they're not worried about upsetting the fans, upsetting players, or the locker room. Really, they're going to. The bigger question mark, you mentioned his name, Chandler Stevenson. This is a guy who has been so underrated. And signed such a value contract the last few years. I think this guy is due for a $7-8 million contract. Some team's going to be crazy enough to pay him, and I think he's Vegas is not going to trade him at the deadline. They're going to hang on to him, but I think he's going to go out there and play his balls off to where he's going to put up 70 points and get a massive deal from somebody.
I would think so, and I don't think that would be the. Do you want Chandler Stevenson or do you want Jonathan Marchessault? That's probably because if you take both their contracts, put them together, that's 7.75. and that's probably right around where Chandler Stevenson signs. He'll be 30 years old. He probably signs up a 3 or 4 year deal, maybe 5 if they want to get that AAV down. But you're probably choosing between those two guys when all is said and done. Do you take the center, who probably is ultimately maybe more valuable over the course of a regular season, or do you sign the guy who just won your Conn Smythe Trophy? That's a tough decision to make. Or can you jettison? Do you find a way to just trade like a William Karlsson?
Yeah, William Karlsson, exactly. I'm finding a way to get rid of him so I can keep Chandler Stevenson around.
Yep, that would. I mean, yeah, it's not as if William Karlsson is a freeloader either, though. He's a very important part of your offense, and that's. I guess the other side of it is, Alec Martinez. He's going to be a UFA. Can you get him to take less? And I guess you've got Robin Leonard at $5 million. They're already using his LTIR space to keep them over the cap. It's going to be a fun. That's really the most fun thing with them is what are they going to do with those guys? Between Martinez, Stevenson, Marchessault, somebody's got to sign for more, and somebody's going to leave.
And then you got to think beyond that, right? You've got Shea Theodore 2 years from now, a UFA who's going to command big money.
Yeah, some big money, big money. But are they lucky to have Zach Whitecloud at 2.75 for the next 5 years?
What a steal!
Oh, where do you think Vegas is going to finish?
Yeah, I'm similar to you. I think they're not trying to win the division by any means, right? They've won their cup, but they're just a team that knows we play so good at both ends of the ice that we just need to get in, right?
Yep.
So ultimately, I think they're just going to be in that 2-3 mix with Los Angeles, and one of them will get home ice. Ultimately, I think Vegas does, just because I think they're a little better of a team. Obviously, won the cup, but yeah, they'll finish number 2 behind Edmonton, who I think does not want to have to go through Vegas or Los Angeles in the first round, because those are 2 really good defensive teams, and I don't think Edmonton wants to have to go through them in the first round
again. Yeah, to win 3 times in a row. It's like back when Ottawa used to play the Leafs in the first round, and the Leafs would rake them every time.
Yep.
Yeah, I think this team. They're just going to ho hum through the regular season. Honestly, they're so good they could accidentally win the division. That's how good I think this team is. And is it hard to believe for anyone else that Jack Campbell's only 26 years old? Why does it feel like Jack Campbell should be, or sorry, Jack Eichel? Why does it feel like Jack Eichel should be like 31 right now?
Yeah, he's been in the league a long time, and it's funny when I was reading or listening to an interview, and they were mentioning when Brew Cassidy came in that he was talking about like, hey, you know what, you can go out and score 100 points, but you need to play a little bit better at both ends of the ice, right? And so a rumor has it that Bruce Cassidy would walk up and down the aisles or the hallways of the arena, and as he's passing Eichel, he's just like Petit Bergeron, just whispering that in his ear.
I like it. Awesome. All right, well, that is the Pacific Division. We made it. We've got one left to go, the Atlantic Division, and then the start of the regular season. So it's going to be fun. We got actual real hockey to watch because God knows the preseason is unwatchable. Highlights only for me with the preseason. And
Connor Bedard, baby.
Yeah, there you go. And yes, we'll reconvene for the Atlantic. We'll do an Atlantic Division show, and then we'll also split off the Leafs and the Red Wings, since we like to dive a little deeper into our own teams. And until then, find us on Twitter at OT Hockey Talk. Justin, enjoy the weekend. Enjoy fixing up your house.
Thank you. Enjoy your trip.
I will. Going to the Upper Peninsula in Michigan, and going to disappear and not have any cell service. So it'll be great.
Love it.
We'll talk to you guys soon.